Hi guys, this video is brought to you today by my friend Shin, aka Weird8 Productions. Visit his channel with the link in the description to see his short films and his movie and cartoon compilations. Bonjour everyone, and yes, I'm finally covering an Olympics aside from the upcoming Tokyo 2020 games. Today, I should say, are covering the possibility of esports being in the Paris 2024 Olympics. And I say we because this was actually meant to be a podcast for my school's newspaper, which I did with my PR classmate Clint Duff and my radio producer Cris Rivera. So I'd like to thank them for having us take on this topic. Me and Clint, we wrote a story on this for our newspaper, and I felt it would also be a good opportunity to go into more detail about this story for a podcast. So I'm going to hand it over to Cris to take over the hosting of this episode.
What's up, everybody? You're listening to a D49er update. I'm your host, Cris Rivera. And surprise, we're going to actually bring you a new podcast episode because why not? And with me today, I have Bobby Yagake. He's the multimedia managing editor at the Daily 49er and contributing writer Clint Duff. What's up, guys?
What's up?
What's up? How are you?
And so today we're going to be talking about esports and the 2024 Paris Olympics.
So apparently the International Esports Federation Secretary General Leopold Chung, that's how you pronounce it, told Reuters that his organization is in deep talks with the International Olympic Committee to bring esports into the Paris Olympics in 2024.
And so there's been talks to add esports for a while now, right? It's been almost a year. I think they've been in talks, or at least there's been some sort of mention about adding esports to the Olympics.
I think there's been rumblings, but this is definitely the first time where a major esports organization has at least said, "Hey, we're talking with the IOC to add it to a future Olympics."
And Clint, do you think what do you think is the likelihood that esports will be added to the Olympics?
Honestly, I want to say like 100% yes, because even though the esports goes against like the whole physical idea of the Olympics, the benefits for the Olympics as a whole and benefit for the esports community as well is just positive. There's not much negative that I can see besides some stereotypes.
And what are some like drawbacks? Why hasn't the IOC like automatically said, "Oh yeah, we want to include esports"? What are some of the what's the contention over there?
So on the subject of the debate of is esports a sport or not, there hasn't been non-athletic competitions in the Olympics since the art competitions in the London Games in 1948. And the reason back then was because the IOC president at the time, Avery Brundage, who, God bless him, but he said at the time he wanted to concentrate on more amateur athletes rather than professional. But ever since the late 80s, professional athletes have been welcome in some sports.
And so continue on that, like another reason, obviously the one that is an elephant in the room is the whole like violent video game topic. That's the big thing in the news in the United States, for example. Violent video games, and that is an issue because the Olympics has an image to keep. It's a worldwide community coming together, and they don't want to ruin that image with possibly the stereotype of violent video games. So that is a hurdle that the Olympic committee has looked at, I'm assuming, and are a little like, we can't make that jump without looking at that hurdle, and it's understandable, and I can't, fault them for looking at a hurdle like that.
And I think the sort of the violence issue in video games is sort of an interesting topic in itself, because when you look at some of the sports, at least like boxing, somebody that watches boxing is not going to necessarily be inclined to act on any sort of violence or to, physically hurt themselves or hurt others. But there's still that stigma around video games, and I know they've done research, and there's really nothing conclusive that has a causal link to video games and violence.
Right. So, like, continuing on the boxing thing, it's like we have, in Olympics, we have boxing, you have karate, I believe, and judo, and you have fencing, which is actually a sword fighting sport. We have these very combat-focused sports in the Olympics, and we say, well, violence is an issue. Well, I'm like, we have really violent-focused aspects. What was the second part of the question? It flew over my head.
Just basically sort of like the violence.
Oh, the studies. So
yes,
continuing the studies, that's true. Like, there's been multiple studies, especially in the United States, especially if you look in past recent history. But if you look at both sides critically and you accumulate the number, it seems to land in the middle. You can't officially say 100%, oh yeah, violent video games cause violence in a young adult. That is not true. There's been studies that say it promotes cooperation in young adults, depending on the game. So far the studies is very 50-50. I'm not going to say 100% either way. That's not my derogative.
Yeah, and in fact, in the story, I found a study from the National Center for Health Research, and they basically said that while violent video games can generate aggressive thoughts, they said it's very difficult to actually prove that the violent video games necessarily causes the players to be violent due to many other factors, including mental health and even things like living conditions of the person.
And, I think that Olympics, they generate billions of dollars every time these events happen. And if they are interested in making money, it'll probably be in their best interest to include esports into that. I don't know how the ratings have been in the last Olympics, but that would definitely, I think, increase their ratings and really, I think, expose people to would have never probably tuned into the Olympics in the first place. What do you guys think?
Statistically speaking, I know for the recent Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, South Korea, I heard the ratings actually went down for that particular one, but I kind of feel if you go back through the Olympics, it really depends on who's competing and even things like who's going to be performing at the opening ceremony. Like, if you look at like games like, Beijing 2008, you have China, this really big country, and they put on this really grand, opening ceremony and then London 2012, you had they celebrate a lot of British pop culture. I remember one of my favorite segments from the opening ceremony was when they went through the 20th century British music, like the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Mud, and so forth. So in terms of ratings, I definitely feel esports would add. I even wrote in the article that there are currently and 250 million esports players worldwide. And Clint even showed me this website. I believe it was for, what game was it, Clint?
I think it was one for the Overwatch League.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about it is
No, sorry. It's the Overwatch Cup. Forgive me, Overwatch Cup, not the league.
Right. And the interesting thing about that was when I looked at the list of countries, a lot of the countries that participated are countries that have hosted the Olympics in the past, like Scandinavian countries, Brazil, and so forth. So I think there's definitely, the audience is there. It's a very, rabid audience and a very competitive event.
So continue on that about, is there an audience? I would yes, depending on the game, of course. Not every game that shows up has a esports audience. But for example, a game like League of Legends. League of Legends is one of the most viewed games in the world. And in I think it's 2016, in October, they sold out Madison Square Garden to the brim to watch 10 people play a video game. If that should be shocking evidence that these gamers, these nobodies, so to speak, were able to sell out Madison Square Garden is intense. And that's just one game. If we look at a game called Overwatch by Activision Blizzard, they, every week during the Overwatch League season, they have 3 days a week they play, and they can average 120,000 people watching for 6-hour periods. And that's every week. That's no number you can be like, you can't just bat an eyelash at that. That's scary. And if you look at also Rocket League pulls in thousands of people, and those are just naming 3 games, not counting other games like Dota, Defense of the Ancients. So if the question is there an audience? Yes, there is an audience, and there's a passionate audience, and they will tune in, 100%, guaranteed.
All right, guys, any final comments?
Probably, I'll list one of the last concerns with any Olympic nowadays is they're trying to cut down costs, especially since the Sochi 24 Winter Olympics in Russia was the most expensive in history at $51 billion. So the clarification that in terms of like would esports add to the cost, and the answer is not by much, because I was talking about with Clint, where could they host this, and we found that this place in Paris called the Paris Expo, which is this convention center, they're fixing up, and it's going to be hosting table tennis and handball. Like, I figured that would actually be be a really good venue for esports. Like, I believe there's like 6 halls in that convention center, and handball, and I believe handball and table tennis are taking 1 hall each, so I think they could easily squeeze esports in. And the other thing that could reduce costs is, one, obviously in the Olympics. Other thing to clarify, they did say if esports becomes an event, it's going to be a demonstration event, which basically means they're going to give out medals, but they won't be included in the official medal count. But the thing about that is, in the Olympics, you don't win cash prizes. You win, like medals, gold, silver, and bronze. So I think that would also take some of the cost away. And, of course, something that the Olympics loves that helps reduce the cost is things like sponsorships. And I'm pretty sure Clint could also tell you, but we were talking about how companies like, Activision Blizzard, companies like Sega, and hardware companies like, Dell, and Razer and just ASUS, they could also, they could provide the computers, and the video game companies can provide the software. So the International Olympic Committee, it kind of just falls into like what they're doing already with a lot of the sports. You see sponsors, all the time. And I mean, even with the upcoming Los Angeles Olympics, if you take a look, a lot of the venues, they have corporate names like, the Bank of California Stadium and the Staples Center. So I think the esports would very easily fall into how budget conscious the IOC is these days.
Last comment, Clint?
Yeah, picking about that, backing on that. So, like, he said, like, the space. So I want to give an example of how much space takes. So, for example, if you're local, you're tuning in, there's a place called, Anaheim, beautiful Anaheim, and there's a place called Disneyland. We love Disneyland, but across Disneyland there's
I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, right? Disneyland. We all been there, hopefully, but there's a little place next to Disneyland that people tend to forget. It's the Anaheim Convention Center. And the Anaheim Convention Center is a really big place, and there's an event happening called BlizzCon. It's going on soon, and there's a place called the Arena attached onto the Convention Center. In the Arena at BlizzCon, they host the World Cup for Overwatch, and literally that space is very small, and the competitors compete in just a really small space. And Spain, obviously, cost, space is an issue, and that shows like it's super small. And then according in the convention halls itself, these are huge halls. If you've been there, for other games, for like Heroes of the Storm, they promote World of Warcraft Arena and Heroes of the Storm. For this big hall, they'll take up like a back corner, like the entire hall. But the space requirement for this, if that's ever an issue, is very minimal. And also, like we were talking to, like a partner said earlier, and we can use existing locations. We don't need to build a new stadium for this convention. So it's a really nice, small in scope, so to speak. But also, again, like on the sponsors, sponsors are good for both sides. It brings in revenue because everyone wants this to continue on. And as you continue, with Asus or the hardware, they can provide hardware computers. So if you're on campus, say you're listening to this on CSULB, MSI actually is sponsoring a little stress relief. And they brought their own hardware, stuff like that, like MSI. They can, if they get their brand, they can sponsor, and they can provide hardware that's cheaper for the Olympics and also good for MSI. And then software for like Blizzard, brings in the software, good for Blizzard, great for the Olympics. So it's either way, it's a win-win. At the end of the day, everyone wins on the sponsorship.
All right, everyone, that about wraps it up. Again, thank you to Bobby and Clint for being on today's show. And this is officially going to be the last episode. But don't forget to check out Bobby's story at the Daily 49er. You can pick them up at the newsstands all around campus, as well as thedaily49er.com. And don't forget to follow them on Twitter and Facebook as well, at Daily 49er. All right, peace out, guys.
Hey guys, this has been a Blood Moon Bobby video. Please like this video or dislike it, and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.